Nick Marley. I'm here for Wisycom USA. I'm here with Jim Dugan. Jim, what exactly is your expertise that you're bringing to the table for this?
Well, today's topic is going to be how wide is your wideband, because there's a lot of information out there about different manufacturers that make wireless microphones that say their equipment is wideband. And so we're going to try to shed some light on that topic.
Right. So different people are using wideband to mean different things.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So when we talk about wideband, we're talking about the usable UHF spectrum.
Yes.
Okay. How big is that spectrum?
Well, in megahertz, using the technical term for spectrum, we're usually talking about UHF, first of all, and UHF is sort of in the middle of radio spectrum in terms of the devices we use for wireless. And so it's 470 megahertz to 698 megahertz. And also it's important to note that that spectrum is beachfront spectrum because of its wavelength, so it's ideal for this application.
Right. So when we talk about beachfront spectrum, what makes it more desirable than other parts of the spectrum?
If you start to move up the spectrum, you get above a gig, then the wavelengths get smaller and propagation isn't as good. When you get below into the VHF spectrum, then the wavelengths get bigger and the antenna sizes start to get really cumbersome. So your antennas get really big. And so UHF spectrum, the antennas are perfect size. The devices, even if you're going to put the antennas in the device, the wavelength tends to make the antennas about this big, you know, a few 4 inches or so.
So that's ideal for broadcasts.
Yeah, body-worn devices, body packs, stick mics, and same with IFB and those types of products. You know, things you put in your ear, in your monitors.
Got it.
That's right.
Okay. We were talking earlier about this as speaking about it as though it were a parking lot.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to visualize it. So can you describe the parking lot?
Yeah, whenever we talk to people about spectrum who aren't really familiar with wireless microphones, the parking lot's a great metaphor. So I always visualize it as it's just about 230 spaces wide, and you can park X amount of cars in each space. So you can put about 3 or 4, depending on the device, 3 or 4 devices in a space. So in this case, we're talking about wireless microphones. So you might be able to put 3 channels of wireless mic, or maybe 4 channels of wireless mic in one meg. It depends on the device.
Depends on the device, depends on environmental factors. But in our parking lot, we've got roughly 240 spaces to work with.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about wideband.
Yes.
Wideband meaning different things.
So in this, let me put it in context, wideband might be the entire space as opposed to some portion of the space. So I think it's all in relation to that particular 240 meg.
Okay.
So that would be how we might define it, as how it relates to the spectrum itself.
Right, right. So if we've got our 240 spaces potential, I'm pulling into the parking lot and I'm in my car and I've got, let's say, a wireless unit, a traditional industry standard wireless unit. How many spots do I have potentially available to me the minute I pull into the lot?
Some of the more popular off-the-shelf gear that's been around for a while, you'd have 26 spots.
Okay, 26 spots.
Yeah, and
so of that 240, right out of the gate, about 214-ish are just off the table, not possible.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then of those 26, am I limited in those 26?
Yeah, you might say if we're going to bring the TV discussion into this metaphor, so if there may be some TV channels in those spaces already, and typically, on average, there's usually 2 TV channels minimum in a given 26 meg, typically.
Okay. And how many spots does a TV channel take up?
6 megahertz.
6 megahertz. So that's
6 spaces.
6 spaces.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So out of my 24 spaces, odds are
26. Yeah.
Out of my 26, odds are 12 of them are going to be taken up.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a real average. Yeah.
So then we're moving into now wideband, which is obviously, it gives you access to a few more spaces, but people mean different things when they say wideband.
Yeah.
What are some of the common definitions of wideband that are out there today?
Well, if your device is typically used let's say 20 or 30 megahertz, and you doubled that size, well, then that would be wider. So you might call that wideband. So you might say 60 spaces is wide.
Okay.
And on average, most legacy equipment out there today is somewhere between 60 and 70 meg wide. And that would be called wideband. There are manufacturers that would call that wideband.
And that gives you access to about a third of the spaces in our parking lot.
That's right.
Right. So out of the gate, if a third of those are used up by TV stations, things like that, that limits you to about 15% of the usable spectrum.
Yeah, that's right.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Which obviously is severely limiting.
Very limiting.
As soon as I pull my car into the lot, I can only park in a handful of spaces.
Right,
and there's probably a lot of competition for those spaces, I would imagine, depending on your application.
And depending on the event, yeah.
Right.
You get to bigger events where there's 300 or 400 other people or 300 or 400 other devices in the spectrum trying to share the spectrum, then you have very little agility when you're in a smaller vehicle.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And so we're just talking about wireless microphones, basically.
Yeah.
So in a larger event, let's say some of the larger networks that might be covering that event are going to use up a good bit of that spectrum. They're going to take up a few spaces themselves. So if you're the smaller, sort of man on the street guy working out of his bag, you're then severely limited. Even under
Very much so.
what is becoming a more common definition of wideband, you're still severely limited in what you can do.
With the legacy paradigm, yeah, legacy equipment, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Now, what is actual wideband?
Well, from a Wisycom perspective, it's the whole entire spectrum. So Wisycom's wideband receivers and transmitters the transmitters are 194, 196 megahertz wide. So just the transmitter alone, and all manufacturers tend to divide they call this switching bandwidth, by the way, how wide it actually can go.
Okay.
And the transmitters tend to be somewhat different. They vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, and the transmitters tend to be the limiting and the more narrow of the two. Receivers tend to be a little bit wider.
Right.
But Wisycom's transmitters are 196, which will cover the entire UHF band, available band now with, we haven't talked about this, but with the new 600 meg spectrum change, what Wisycom calls their band 7 goes from 470 all the way to 663, which is the top of the new UHF available spectrum, and everything in between.
So if I'm pulling into the same parking lot with the latest Wisycom device, which would be band 7,
yes.
How many spots do I have potentially at my disposal the moment I pull into the lot?
All of them.
All of them?
Yeah, yeah, all of them.
And then obviously
that's
we can get into...
That's why we say that's wideband. Yeah.
Right. What is real wideband? And I guess the answer is all of it.
Yes, that's right.
It's more like full band.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so Wisycom gives you access to every space in the lot, and then you have tremendous flexibility regardless of what TV stations might be operating, what other operators, users, or carriers might be working in the area.
Yeah.
You have the ultimate in flexibility, whereas using a traditional or legacy device, I only have access to those 26 spaces, and of those 13 might be taken up, and of the 13 that are left, another 5 or 6 might be taken up. And then we get into crowding issues because you can only fit so many in one space. But a Wisycom device is going to give you the flexibility, the adaptability to move into any space in the lot.
Absolutely.
Wherever there's space.
That's right, yeah. And there's a lot of changing conditions right now with the UHF spectrum changing a lot. The big topic is the 600 meg auction, which we talked about just a second ago. So what is going on is that in like let's use New York for example. So right now there's TV stations that are using spectrum from 470 all the way up to 698, and the spectrum that's sort of, you cut it in the middle, is about where the spectrum change is happening. The TV stations that are above the 600 meg line, many of them are going to get repacked down into the existing spectrum.
Right.
And so that's going to be a dynamic thing. It's going to be something in flux. So even if you made a decision to buy something that was 26 meg now, or 75 meg or more, no matter what you buy, it's going to be a changing environment. So you want to have as much agility as possible. That's the idea. That's the goal with wideband equipment, really.
So in other words, if you buy a 26 meg device, those spaces, those parking spaces might be open today, but the FCC changes that are scheduled are supposed to be finished by 2020, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And in the meantime, there's going to be a lot more moving pieces,
Yeah.
and there's nothing to say that those 26 spaces won't be half taken up by handicap parking or reserved parking of some sort, right?
Yeah, and it's going to keep changing. That's right.
So-
Until it
so-
finally lands in where it's going to end up. Yeah.
Right, right. And eventually there will be some sort of a settling, but in the meantime, isn't agility paramount
It is. Yeah.
for any
It is.
for any boots on the ground end user?
Yeah, and it's about a 3-year cycle. I mean, we're 2008. Well, 2 years, 2.5 years. So we got some sort of transient time to deal with. We've got some interim stuff to deal with.
Yeah.
That's the best way to say it.
Yeah. So if I were an end user, bag mixer freelancer, boots on the ground at any major event, Wisycom wireless products are going to give me the best possibility of finding a parking space in the parking lot and actually being able to work the event to the best of my ability.
They are, and you bring in another character into this is the frequency coordinator, which we might call the parking attendant.
The parking attendant, right? Yeah.
Who's going to tell you? He's going to orchestrate where you can park. So you're going to go to him, the frequency coordinator. You're going to say, "Hey, this is what I have to use," and he's going to say, "Oh, well, we've already got 15 or 20 other people already here with that particular device. So we're going to we don't have much spectrum left. So you're going to end up getting the scraps,
Right.
so to speak." Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Wisycom, you have the whole buffet.
Yeah, with Wisycom you can use any spectrum at all. It's just easy as a frequency coordinator, which I do, major events.
Right.
It's just a game changer to have that kind of technology in this environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, terrific. I think that's great information. Information anybody would find useful. And again, the idea being that the boots on the ground end user stands to benefit the most from utilizing the full feature set of these products, and in particular Band 7 Wisycom giving you access to the full parking lot and establishing the parking lot analogy. So Jim, thanks a lot for
Thanks, Nick.
talking to us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do a few more of these soon.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right.